Briefly before the upload, I had a treatment yesterday, and after my treatments, don't feel great for a couple days. So I apologize for it kind of being off on this upload. I will do my best to have a better upload the next couple of days. So just bear with me. I apologize. Thanks, guys. Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an exciting state-by-state subscriber submission upload for you. Before we get into that, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's subscriber submission, state by state, is going to lead us over to Arizona and Arkansas. These next encounter is from Arizona. Every year, my family would go camping for a week in the deep parts of Hutch Mountain, south of Flagstaff and Winona. To get there, you take 260 to 87 and north on Happy Jack. Take it south of Mormon Lake. It's deep forest, and where we would be going camping would be way off the normal campground in the middle of nowhere. We would get up around 3 or 4 in the morning, pack the truck up. My dad had this large lifted truck that looked like a Ford F-250. My dad's truck looked just like Bigfoot, the monster truck, with a shell on the back. Every year we would show up to Hutch in the dark. This was one of the funnest parts because every time we would drive at night, we would see all kinds of animals with the spotlight. My dad had a high-powered spotlight, like the one seen on E.T. But this night, I was in for something I'd never seen before. We would turn the light off and use it only on low light and hand spotlight. I would hang out the window. I was maybe 8 to 10 years old. I'd been spotting animals with the spotlight all night. We had seen some deer, some elk, some skunk on the dirt road. A lot of animals like normal. We had to take the trail slow because of all the animals. Elk would just walk in front of the truck all the time. To the right of me, I had seen 2 red glowing eyes. Not normal for some reason. I had this uncomfortable fear that something wasn't right. The forest was dead quiet. I turned the spotlight on these 2 glowing red eyes, and what I saw was a large wolf-like animal standing on 2 legs. It had a face like a wolf and dark black animal fur. If you'd ever seen the Nothing from Neverending Story, that's what it looked like. It moved just like a person. The light was on it for about 2 seconds. It took some steps backwards into the heavy brush. I tried to get my dad to see it, but it happened so fast, only my brother and I saw it. My dad said it must have been a black bear. No, it was not. We've seen black bear before. My dad's truck has a lift kit on it about 3 feet off the ground. This thing was easily 6 feet. Also, there was no sounds of animals. I felt cold after seeing this thing. One other thing that was strange on this camping trip was the amount of coyote around our camp that trip. They were active all night, howling. They would circle around our camp at night, and they would get unusually close to the campfire. The animals seemed to have no fear of us. This was strange to me. If we had to use the restroom, we did it in a group because of the coyotes around the camp. This was like 3 days in on a 5-day trip. I will never forget what I saw that night. This is the first time I've ever shared this encounter with anybody. I'm 39 years old. I've studied wildlife for most of my life. To this day, I have no idea what it was. I know it was watching us. I could feel it. Could this animal control other animals like the coyotes, you think? My second encounter was in California at my grandfather's place. Not sure where it was, but it was a forest, like by and around the home. I knew it was government-owned property for military family. It was fenced in and had military police at the entrance. My grandfather worked for the Pentagon. We don't know what he did, but we know he worked for them. He never spoke about what he did. He was very secretive. Only reason we knew this was because his death, the military, let us know some of the unclassified places he had worked in for legal reasons, for assessed, and so on. We found out he had worked in counterintelligence. He was highly decorated. 2 weeks before he spoke to me about some things he did. I'm 35 at the time. This was first time he ever told me anything about what he did. None of his kids had any idea what he was doing. His specialty was in occult activity in the United States. I'm currently working on an investigation in human trafficking with the Jehovah's Witnesses. We spoke about all kinds of things, but this was not like story time. It was more of a debriefing. He told me that monsters are real and that he felt that dogmen are evil. They are satanic. My grandfather is a religious fanatic and is obsessed with Christianity. The reason I'm telling you this is after seeing your show about Dogman, I believe he had worked with them in the past. Back to my story. It was about 9 p.m. at my grandfather's house. My grandfather's backyard had a hill that was full of forest behind it. A very small backyard that led to a hill with the forest. So I'm 8 to 10 at this time. I was walking by the window. It was dead quiet, but the moon was bright and you could see outside. I felt like I was being watched. I had goosebumps. I know something was out there. I could feel it. It was dead quiet outside. No bugs, nothing. I look out the window. This was not just a normal window. It took up most of the back wall. It was a massive 2-part glass window. There it was, looking directly at me. I was so scared I couldn't move or talk. I just froze. It was just me and this creature looking directly at me. It was dark black fur, standing on 2 legs staring at me. I looked at it through the window. It waved its hand and turned around very slowly and began to crawl on 4 legs up the hill. It turned around for a moment and gave me an evil grin. This may sound stupid, but I thought it smiled at me with a sinister grin. Friggin' evil. I was shaking so hard that the milk in my hand fell on the floor. This dogman was much smaller than the first one I saw in the forest. That one was at least 6 to 7 feet tall. This was probably maybe 5'9" or so. It was the same size as my dad. For comparison, this one felt different than the other one. This one was more personal than animal-like, the first encounter on the camping trip to Hutch Mountain. I never told anyone about this. I didn't even ask my grandfather about this one time we spoke. I planned on doing so, but he passed away before I could. During our discussion about what he knew about secret societies, at one point he did tell me that the government has unnatural programs that he said are evil. He was a hermit and not very social. I thought this was because of him being a genius IQ. But it wasn't. It was because of the horrible things he knew. He said it was better for his family to live in ignorance That way they could have a better life. He spoke about technique the government has for erasing memories. This was all before I heard this on your Dogman show. This is why I'm speaking to you about this, and only you at this time. My third encounter. The third encounter is not from me. My wife was speaking to some of her friends about Dogman at a work retreat for women at her company. They were telling ghost stories, so my wife told the group about my Dogman story. One of the girls said, "Oh my God, her husband's in the military and he was on duty." And he said that he saw the same thing. He was on duty in the watchtower, and one night he saw massive glowing light that lit up the night sky. He said the ball of light went back down from the sky. It was so bright, it looked like it was daylight. And out of the forest, 7 wolf-like men came out of the forest to the light, walking on 2 legs. He said he thought he was going mad and seeing things, but was so scared he didn't report it to his superiors. He never told anyone, but after he got back from his mission, he told his wife, that is our friend of ours. My wife told her to speak to my husband, me. Came over last month and told me her husband's story. I told her she was not crazy, and her husband has been obsessed with Dogman since. He is active duty, but next time I see him, I will try to get more details of this encounter. He did say the light took off so fast, it could not have been any kind of military vessel. Also, he didn't say where he was or what base. This was classified per his wife. He just had to tell someone about what he saw. His wife also said he's not the kind of person to make up stories. He's very serious. I've been speaking to people, and so far, this is the only other person that's seen this. After my second encounter, I did tell a friend Aaron about this. He was my best friend at the time, and he was Navajo, 10 years old, that lived down the street. He translated the story to his grandmother. She told him that it was a spirit called the Skinwalker. She then told my friends this was not for outside, and she left the room. We spoke to her son, my friend's dad. He told us about spirits that change their shape and take out the form of a wolf. But he didn't believe that. Old story. I remember my friend telling me later he was lying. He does, but we're not supposed to speak to outsiders about it. My parents told them that I was part native, also from my mother's side. After that, my dad and grandmother would tell me stories. They felt it was important that I learned about my culture. My parents told them they did know anything about our ancestors. They did later take me to the reservation to get together, where jewelry makers would sell on their property. He spoke to other native people about what I saw. They didn't say much, but me and my friend left to go get some ice cream at a story area with a food shop that was about a mile or so away. From the festival, you had to walk across the open desert to get to it. A long walk, but we were bored. And my friend told me they sell ice cream at one of the shops. On our way back, a strange man started following us. We couldn't make out his face. He had a hoodie on. We started running and screaming for help. As he ran, the man followed us. As we got closer to the festival, some of the Navajo men came running to help us, but when we turned around, the man was gone, and only a couple coyotes were left behind. The men were very upset. They spoke to me in English and told me we can leave and walk around here without adults with us. It was not safe for white people to be out here. We stayed with his dad for the rest of the day. I had white light blonde hair, and blue eyes. If you look at me, you would not know I have Navajo bloodline. Also, this was not an open festival, it was private. I was the only white person there. His dad was someone important in the Navajo, not sure what. He told them that I was there to learn about my people. At this point, both of our families are very close. We would spend the nights at each other's homes. I had him on the show, and it was a very entertaining show. He talked a lot about some of the things. He actually told me that while he's been working, uncovering Jehovah's Witness human trafficking and stuff like that, that he had seen a dogman or werewolf-like door at some Jehovah's Witness temple or whatever. Very interesting guy, very cool guy. He must have used talk text. I just want to clarify that because the wording was off. That's why I was reading slow and trying to piece it together as I went. A lot of times that happens when I get subscribers. They send me encounters. It's just, I think it's so quickly done that they want to get it out that they kind of just do and don't really spell check or anything, but you guys get the basic gist of it. It was pretty messed up. Not his writing, but the encounters. And his writing, but not his writing. The encounters were messed up. I'm joking. Let's jump over to Arkansas now. Hey Jeff, first I want to thank you very much for the very helpful and informative channel you have made for the Dogman community. Thanks to many subscribers, I can now put into words what I saw. So from October of 2008 through the summer of 2010 was a highly spiritual time for me. We lived outside of the city limits at the time in an old farmhouse. My usual route I took to work was the new interstate, I-555 to Jonesboro, Arkansas. I worked unusual hours at the time, and they changed slightly daily. The very early morning before my encounters, I was nearly in a major car pileup on the overpass due to a freezing fog. It shook me very badly, and I even pulled over on the shoulder and called to wake up my husband because I needed him to help calm me down. This is why the next very early morning I chose to take an alternative route when I saw we had another freezing fog warning on the early news. The best I can describe where it happened is to go to a community of Painway, Arkansas, then find the old highway 463. When you do that, you can go to Street View on the map and go towards the town of Truman. Only go about 3 miles down through the past the small community on the gravel road on your left. There will be a thick tree line on your right and fields on your left. So as I'm driving slowly and cautiously down 463, I saw up ahead a car with its hazard lights going in the opposite lane. Since there was really no shoulder, I immediately felt a sense of dread that increased as I got closer. I remember thinking, please don't step out in front of me asking for help. Not to be mean person, but because I don't feel safe stopping for strangers on an isolated road. When I got maybe 3 car lengths from the other car, I started seeing 2 dog legs running back and forth in the light of the flashers. It appeared to be scrambling, like it was trying to hide, but something definitely wasn't right. I started talking aloud to myself under my breath, saying, "Where are the dog's other legs, and why are they so huge?" Then, just as I got right up to the front of this car, this thing stepped out all the way to the yellow line on the highway. It all happened so fast, but I knew my unexplained fear I felt was correct because this very, very huge werewolf was right there. Freezing fog be damned, I stomped on the accelerator in pure panic, yelling to myself, "That was a werewolf, a freaking werewolf!" No statum. There's no such thing, but there it was. Was it chasing someone? Was that why it was scrambling around? Answering myself, I said, no, you looked for any humans and there wasn't any. Just a bleep bleep werewolf. This can't be happening. I don't remember getting on the interstate, only driving down it towards my job in a panic. I really wanted to stop somewhere and call my husband, but my body took over and kept going, gripping the steering wheel and had the accelerator pushed to the floor. It took a long while, but to get calmed down enough so nobody at work would notice and ask me about it, because there was no way I was telling anybody about seeing a friggin' werewolf. Luckily, I only saw one person at work until after 8 a.m., and that was roughly 4 hours after the encounter or sighting, or whatever it was. When it was running around the car, I knew it moved too fast to be a dog, and it only had 2 legs. And when it stepped out right beside me, it stood straight up like a human, but had a wolf's head. I had never heard of Dogman until I was searching real sightings of werewolves. Then Jeff's channel came up. I clocked out of work at 9 a.m. since it was my shorter hour day, and I knew I had to go back down that road home. It was still freezing cold, even though the sun was shining brightly. I could see way before I got to the spot where the car with the hazard lights flashing had been, and there was no sign of it. When I got to the area, I looked out to the field, and there it was. Roughly 20 car lengths away was a huge wolf. It was outrageously huge, slowly walking on all fours toward the opposite way. But then it turned its head back and looked right at me. Thanks to another subscriber of yours, Jeff, I can put this into words. Its face looked at me in an animated way. Its eyes locked with mine, and I knew without a doubt it knew who I was. The way its head rested against its shoulders is what showed me that the front of this wolf thing was different than a normal wolf. Its upper back had more of a humped over look to it. It was black as spades and humongous. Stopping never crossed my mind since I was trembling in fear, just like earlier that morning in the dark the first time I had seen it. I had myself convinced not long after seeing the first sighting that whomever was driving that car had turned into a werewolf. Now, with the car completely gone, and there that werewolf was, I saw I was wrong. When I got home, my husband called me on his break at work, and I told him everything, explaining how that massive wolf was at least 7 feet tall. And that wasn't counting his huge, very long tail. Just from his head to the start of his tail, I was talking so fast and frantically telling him everything. He knows me better than anyone else does. I was not mistaken what I saw. With something else. Since then, we periodically will take that road on our way home looking for my wolf or my werewolf. So many questions ran through my head months after. Like, where did it go all those hours? Did whomever come back to the car? What was it doing there? Is the Dogman the same as what I heard men talk about they had seen decades ago? Hellhounds? They said their eyes glowed red. This creature's eyes weren't red or glowing. Before finding your channel, Jeff, my husband has been the only other living soul I have ever shared this with. Today's third Arkansas encounter. Hey Jeff, my name is M. I am 54 years old. My husband is C. He is 46. We are both prior military, and my husband's been in combat on more than one occasion, so he suffers from severe PTSD. We both have our bachelors from UCA, and we've been happily married for 21 years now. So we are not a couple of flakes. I grew up in the foothills of the Ozarks in a town called Shirley, which only had a population of 336. So I occupied myself in the woods growing up. In fact, When I wasn't in school, that's where I'd be found. My father was a rock mason and a wood carver. Being his only child, I was raised a tomboy. He taught me about plants, animals, and how to hunt. So I'm very familiar with the woods here in Arkansas. My husband grew up in a shadow of White Rock Mountain in a little community called Pleasant View here in Arkansas. His father served in Special Forces during Vietnam and taught him to be a survivalist from birth. So we were both at home in the forest, to say the least. Back in 2010, we were spending the night with a friend of ours by the name of Austin. He and my husband were very close. He lived in an old single-wide trailer. It sat on a hill and way out. That one end was higher than the other. The tongue end was about a foot off the ground and the other was about 4.5 feet off the ground. So the small sideways rectangular window in the bathroom was about 8 feet off the ground. Austin lives in a community that's way out in the sticks, just outside of Plummersville, Arkansas, which we will not mention in order to respect his privacy. It was a pleasant summer evening, and we were all hanging around the house. C got up to go to the restroom as the rest of us were talking. He hadn't been in there long when I heard him calling my name. I noticed his tone sounded off, strange. I rushed back to the bathroom to see what was going on. When I opened the door, the first thing I heard was a low, rumbling growl. I looked at my husband, who's still sitting on the toilet, with shock look on his face and his pants around his ankles, and asked him, "What the hell was that?" He said, "I don't know." With it being dark out, I couldn't see anything out the long, skinny window, so I ran over and turned up the light and went back to the window. The street light was out of my line of sight, but still illuminated that end of the yard. There was a small strip of mowed grass at the end of the trailer, and then there was a short bush. All I could see was a large mass on all fours parting the tall grass and shrubbery. It looked to be about 4 feet across the shoulders and at least 6 feet long from shoulder to butt. I didn't see a tail. I turned around and asked him what just happened. He told me that he had come into the bathroom, sat down when he heard this loud growl that made his insides vibrate, and tried to yell for me, but didn't want to be too loud at the same time. He says it had growled a low rumbling growl that was similar to the one that I had heard just after this. I know that what we heard was no dog, no coyote, no bear, none of which could ever growl like this. Only my husband heard the first and loudest and scariest growl/snarl of them all, which scared him stiff. He said he felt all the blood in his body pour down to his feet in fear, worst of which was he felt the first growl on the back of his neck literally through the open window, which only had a screen between him and the creature. It was one of those turn the handle and the blades of glass would open windows, and the bottom of this window was 8 feet off the ground. He was afraid to turn around and look out the window. He swore it sounded like a werewolf from the movies, and as a canine for sure, and doesn't remember any smells. At this time, we had never researched or knew about Dogman or werewolves being real. My husband says that when he was sitting on the toilet and the beast growled on his neck, it was the scariest moment in his entire life. That's coming from someone who has seen absolute worst and best of humanity. He said if he hadn't been on the toilet, he probably would have wet or soiled himself. Also, Austin had a pit bull outside tied up at the back corner of the trailer, almost right next to the window that was located behind my husband, as he was doing his business on the toilet. We never heard a peep out of her during all of this. This all happened late in the evening, and in the morning we found out why. She was lying in the yard with her chest and stomach ripped out and the contents were gone. We felt so bad for her. My husband thinks he interrupted the beast while he was eating her, and it voiced its displeasure at him. A few years later, in 2014, 2015, we were in Bush, Arkansas. We had 10 acres with a medium-sized creek that ran down the backside of our property, which empties into the White River at the southeast corner of our land. Beyond the creek, at the backside of the property, is Army Corps of Engineers land. Our property was roughly rectangular in shape. The road we lived down dead-ended and became a very long, curvy driveway. The house was in the middle of the acreage. You couldn't see the house from our steel gate at the entrance. If you were standing at the end of our driveway, the house and shed would be on your right, and the only house that was close to us was back down the drive to the left of our gate about 150 feet, and had two 8x8 metal sheds at the end of their single-wide mobile home. Their fence ran down the full length of our driveway. The first time something happened, I was taking Sugar Bear, our miniature poodle, out to go to the bathroom at 2 in the morning. I usually walked her on a leash because there's bobcats, coyotes. My husband even went face-to-face with a mountain lion one evening, even though Fish and Game denies they are out here. It was a clear night, the full moon, so I didn't take a flashlight. I was just across the driveway near the fence that marked our property boundary when I heard a rock hit the tree near me from across the fence. It went thwack against the tree, thump thump on the ground. My heart began to beat faster as I struggled to see what was there. I couldn't see what threw it, but my first thought was Bigfoot. Sugar didn't bark, but she was heading toward the house, tugging on the leash. So I took her advice and backed toward the house, never taking my eyes off the wood line. Then we went inside. I told my husband the next morning. He said that he believed that I had heard something out there, but doubted it was a Bigfoot. A few days later, a friend came by to do some fishing. We'll call him Willie. He took his gear, a water jug, and one of our large handheld spotlights. It was around 5 p.m. when he went down to the creek. I'd say around 7 or 8 p.m. after dark, he came running to our front door with no stuff and only one shoe. He was breathing heavily, eyes wide and white as a ghost. When we asked Willie what happened, he said, "I don't know what's down there, but it's big and mad as hell." We asked where all the stuff was, and he added, "I left it down there and I'm not going back for it. I ran plumb out of one of my shoes. I'm never fishing here again." He told us that the spotlight had died on him, so he didn't get a good look at it. So he stayed the night, and we told him we would go get his stuff the next day. The next morning, my husband and I went to the dock to grab his stuff. His fishing gear was untouched, but his shoe was missing, as well as his water jug. We found his shoe about 30 feet up the creek and his bottle on the bank about 10 or more feet from the stream. My husband didn't know what to think because Willie is a bit of a lush and had the tendency to spin a good yarn now and then. But I believed him. I mean, the man ran out of his sneaker and kept running. A few nights later, I was taking Sugar out at approximately 2:30, maybe 3 in the morning. This time, instead of heading toward the river, I took her out toward the gate at the opposite end of the driveway. I took a small handheld spotlight with a click switch on it that night. We had turned off the street light that stood between our house and the shed because we liked to look at the stars. As we walked past the sheds, which were on my right, I heard wham as something huge smacked the side of one of our sheds. I was so startled that when I jumped, I clicked off the light and dropped it at my feet. As fast as I could pick it up and turn it on and scan the area, nothing, absolutely nothing is what I saw. I figure it was hiding behind one of them. This time Sugar ran behind me barking. I was tired and I had forgotten to put her on her leash. I backed up toward the house, my heart thumping. We went inside. This went on every 2 weeks or so. He did this for about a month and a half, but each time it smacked the shed, I jumped less and less. I was startled, but I was curious at the same time. I really wanted to see this thing. After this, I brought my 12-gauge pump with me every night as a precaution. After all, there are wild animals, and they can be unpredictable. The next morning I told my husband what happened, and he just looked at me puzzled and gave me the typical spouse who hasn't seen or heard anything in response. I don't know, babe. Maybe you're imagining things. Even after what happened to our friend, I wasn't angry with him for his response. He just hadn't seen or heard anything yet. I never pumped my shotgun any of these times that this had happened because I never felt threatened. It never growled at me or made any vocalization. It felt more like it was laughing at me inside, thinking, I'm watching this silly human jump. I never smelled anything, but I think that was because it crosses the river and possibly the creek to get there, depending on where it crossed the river. One evening, I was on the back deck of barbecuing dinner when, down where the creek and river meet, I hear a loud grunting sound. It reminded me of a gorilla, but it definitely had a different quality to it. There was much more bass. Like I stated before, our shed was to the right of the house on the west. To the right of the shed, we had 4 canoes on a trailer. Behind those in the house were trees all the way up to the creek. Most of our land was wooded with clear trails through it. This night, it was around 11 p.m. when I took Sugar out. As Sugar and I passed the shed, I heard crashing like an elephant coming through the woods. Except this was on 2 legs. It was moving from right to left behind the canoes toward the house. This time I pumped that 12 gauge and it froze. At first, I couldn't hear anything. Then I hear shuffle, 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 shuffle in the leaves where it stood. I got the impression that it didn't know what to do at this moment. I just didn't want our pup being a snack for this thing. I shined the shotgun's flashlight into the woods, but I couldn't see anything. No eye shine, nothing. So once again, I backed my way toward the house and went in. I figure it must have been shot before by the way it froze. I never intended to shoot it unless I had to. I told my husband upon entering the house what had just happened. So the next morning he went out and looked and found nothing. But our land was very rocky. He didn't even find broken tree limbs. He tried to make as much noise as possible back there in the trees, but he came nowhere close to making that much noise. I couldn't believe he didn't find anything. It really blew my mind. It was so loud it sounded like it had been breaking everything in its path. He was beginning to think I was going nuts, and then, about a week later, he was taking Sugar out with the shotgun in tow. When he got his surprise, they got out of the door and onto the middle of the driveway. When the woods on the other side of the fence came something huge crashing through the trees. My husband doesn't scare easy. He was raised in the woods of Arkansas by a Vietnam Green Beret veteran turned Southern Baptist preacher, and he himself is a combat vet. Both my husband and his father are tough old school guys. But he pumped that 12 gauge, and just like before, it froze. He shined the flashlight into the trees high and low, but saw nothing. He said it sounded like a prehistoric mammoth crashing through the woods, coming toward him. But he couldn't see or find anything. Much like myself, he backed into the house, shotgun at the ready. A few days later, the neighbors at the gate end of our driveway told us that just after dark that night, before they had chased a large man off their property to ours. I have always wanted to go back there and see if he's still there, but I can't get anyone to go with me. I wonder if anyone would be interested. We moved not long after that. We moved to a suburb on Rogers on Beaver Lake called Prairie Creek. After all this, my husband bought us all Glock 10s, or Glock 10 millimeters. Our son lives with us, so there's 3 Glocks. We now have a rule that no one goes outside at all without their 10 millimeter. He also bought 2 Rock Island VR-80 semi-automatic 12-gauge shotguns with magazines. He turned our Yukon XL Denali into an adventure vehicle and is planning to get 2 more guns, a Ruger precision rifle in 300 Win Mag, and a Marlin lever action for 4570 before we move back out to the country again, which I hope is soon. Thank you for reading this. Tonight's fourth encounter comes to us from Arkansas still. I live in a small town in a small county in southwest Arkansas. I've only told a few people these events that have happened for fear of ridicule or sounding crazy. I stopped telling them. Is a series of events that happened a few years ago. Feel free to share them if you want to. My son has friends that hung around with him in high school, and they were here at my house playing cards, dominoes, video games, basketball at the school near the house, etc. They were here every day, almost, and most nights. One is a football player, one's a basketball player, and 3 of them work for the sheriff's department as I type this. They were out playing basketball at the school, which at the time had no light, and it was dark, so they were playing in the dark except for a far-off streetlight. This was told by every one of them. Keep in mind, there is no road behind the school. They came back to the house huffing and puffing, out of breath and scared. I finally got them to calm down and tell me what happened, and their encounter is as follows. They were playing horse in the dark when all of a sudden, in the thick brush, they heard what is described as a huge dog being ran over by a vehicle. They stopped playing to listen. Then the brush started shaking violently, and a light in one of the classrooms came on as they were running away. At 10 p.m. the light comes on. I asked. They were all adamant, so I said, okay, let's go see. I can say with all honesty that after we all loaded up with bats and machetes, that when we got into the school area, I didn't want to get out, and neither did they. There is a heavy darkness behind the school, and the headlights were struggling to penetrate. We all got out except for one, and to this day they don't like talking about it. The story doesn't end there either. About a week after that happened, it was dark with a crescent moon. There's loud howling right beside my house where there are no lights. Some people I know will say dog and wolves aren't around here, but I have heard dogs and I have heard coyotes. I spent countless hours in the woods while growing up with my 4 brothers and my dad because we did a lot of hunting and fishing, or we wouldn't have much meat. This howl vibrated the windows and made the hair stand on the back of my neck. I turned the porch light on and went out onto the porch, but whatever it was gone. About a month after that, again, very dark, there was a howl beside the porch. It was so loud it sounded like it was in the middle of the living room. It had rained the night before, so I thought I would see if there were tracks the next morning. Sure enough, I went outside when it was light out, but still early enough for dew. I found 2 tracks. I wear a size 11, and these tracks weren't as long as mine, but they were almost as wide and almost shaped of a foot, but different. Wide at the toes and like a small child's foot at the heel, but no arch, and slimmer than a child's. I put my foot beside them and took pictures, but lost them when I had to do a factory reset on my phone. The story still continues because something happened a few weeks ago that shook me up. At about 1 in the morning, I woke up to use the restroom, and while in the bathroom, there was a very loud growl outside the bathroom window. Like an evil kind of growling, and very loud. I asked my neighbor the next morning if he heard it, and he informed me that he was at work, but the growling had woken his girlfriend who was sleeping. We haven't seen anything, just heard it, but if it looks like it sounds, then I don't want to see it. I am glad to finally get this out, and I appreciate you giving me and others an outlet to clear the air. Thank you for your time. Second email from him. I want to start off by saying that I feel much better since I was able to tell you my incidences that happened in southwest Arkansas. Did I mention I live about 17 miles from Boggy Creek? I have another incident that freaked me out. I was on my parents' porch with my dad's dogs that I'll call little brother and little sister. It was dark at night. I heard howling that shook me to the core, and the dogs or actually big dogs, moved behind me like they were trying to hide. It was so loud that it vibrated my chest. These two dogs followed me everywhere, and I stuck my head in to tell my dad what had happened. He told me to go check it out, and I thought I'd be brave with those two big dogs with me. I walked off the porch with a flashlight in hand, but when I looked around me, the dogs were not there. I heard the howl one more time, and I made a beeline back to the house. And who was there? Those two big brave dogs, trying to hide behind the chairs. It wasn't funny at the time, I can assure you. I shared your tale of events with my son's friends, and one of them, that was lagging behind, asked me why I didn't mention the strange lights. I told him the others didn't say anything about lights, except for the classroom. He said, "Yes, sir, there were dim lights coming from the brush where the sounds were coming from." Alright guys, so there is today's upload. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to share your encounters, trusting me to keep your anonymity. It really means a lot to me that you guys feel that way. I want to thank everybody for all the support. That really means the world to me. Also, I want to encourage everybody to be kind to each other. And with that, may the Great Spirit watch over all of us and guide us through our path in life. And until then, I'll see you tomorrow, my friends.